let's talk about divinity and perspective, and then some. So when I think of divinity, I visualize it as being at the tip of a triangle or a pyramid, well, whatever you prefer. So this is the pyramid or a triangle, and divinity sits at the top. Now, there are many different ways you can view how a person is to attain or approach divinity. Think of, say there's multiple religions, right? And each religion is its own triangle or pyramid. Say this particular triangle is Christianity, with the divine being at the top. And you have, I don't know, Buddhism, name your religion. Each religion has its own specific pyramid with the divine being at the top. Now, in this triangle or pyramid, there's a base. So it's at the bottom here. I think this is where most people reside. Now, as you work your way up the triangle to this precipice, you may have different levels of engagement or a hierarchy, I guess you could say. So you have the common man down here at the base of the triangle, and you have, I don't know, deacons at a church, Sunday school teachers, pastors, ministers, priests, pope. As you go up the triangle, the more important or the more relevant or the more impactful an individual or organization becomes. Approaching the divine. Now, there are different ways you can look at potential difficulty or challenges that you may face when it comes to attaining divinity, reaching the precipice. The idea of conforming everything you've ever known into this particular ideal, it seems like a very challenging task. It's difficult because everyone has lived a different life, an entirely different life. Everyone. No one's experiences are exactly the same. And even if they were, that doesn't mean that each person will process what has happened in their lives in the same way as the next person. It's just not how we're wired. And I think it's very challenging to ask or expect someone to be able to conform themselves to an ideal goal to reach the precipice. It's extremely difficult. That doesn't mean that it's not worth it, right? Like, there's something to be said for how difficult it is to accomplish a task. Like you strengthen yourself through difficulty and challenge in life. Like the more you go through, the harder it is. When you attain or reach a certain goal, you feel much more accomplished, right? So that's one way of looking at it, because I do want to talk about perspective. Another way of looking at it is, say, the same triangle or pyramid with divinity being at the top. So you're trying to reach divinity by climbing up the outside of the triangle, right? So instead of working from within the triangle to reach the top, maybe you have to climb over barriers in your life that make it more challenging for you to find the divine or to reach divinity, because life be lifing, right? And life is not easy. So it can be difficult to attain an ideal when life throws barrier after barrier in your way. Now, let's back to the other perspective, approaching from the outside. There's this term in physics called a friction coefficient. Think of a friction coefficient as a measure of resistance that a surface has. I'll use two examples. So we have ice. If you run your hand on slick ice, you're not going to have a lot of resistance, especially if there's a little bit of moisture on top. It's going to be smooth, right? Ice would have a very low or non-existent friction coefficient. It's easy. Compare it to asphalt. If you run your hand on asphalt, it's not going to be as smooth as it is as if it were ice you're running your hand on. So asphalt has a higher friction coefficient, right? So I'm just, in the spirit of connectivity, trying to tether one thing to the next. So you could think of approaching divinity from the outside of the triangle, and say the approach, the sides of the triangle have a high friction coefficient. It's going to be challenging to make your way all the way to the top. You're going to get tired on the way, right? Someone else might fall down and you'll have to maneuver around them. Someone else who tried to reach the precipice, tried to reach divinity, they might fall from divinity. And there's a possibility they could take you down with them on the way back down the triangle or pyramid. So there's a few different ways of looking at the same thing. Another perspective, or another way of looking at it is, okay, well, what if instead of this, we have this? It's a V. It's a triangle to a V. Instead of divinity being at the top, it's like we're at the bottom. And there's this well of divinity, these sources that we can pull from to find our own truth. If you can visualize that. So say, because we are so different, our experiences are so vast, one person to the next, it could be seen as being easier to fill yourselves with divinity as opposed to trying to attain and conform to a divine path that's been laid before you. Now, there's a couple ways you can visualize this. There's a couple different methods of perspective you can visualize. Now, you could say, if you pour divinity anywhere in this triangle, gravity will pull it down and it will fill you up. You can fill yourself with divinity. That could be seen, if you look at it from one perspective, it can be easy, much easier to fill yourself with divinity than to try and strive and attain for divinity. But is easy always better? Who knows? Another way of looking at it is that you could argue that finding the divinity that suits you specifically can be more challenging, because not all sources of divinity can conform to the individual that you are. It can take a lot of time to know what to allow to fill you up. So, I mean, those are just two different ways of thinking about the same topic. And, I think it's good to be able to visualize. It's good mental training. I call them thought exercises or thought experiments. It's a good way to think about the same thing from a different angle or a different different perspective. Which leads me to another point, the periodic table. Now I know there are a few science-leaning people probably listening. I think you'll know or understand. If not, I'll try to do my best to explain. On the one end of the periodic table, you have your noble gases. Now, the noble gases are thought to be the precipice of balance, right? It has a completed octet, meaning its outer ring is full of electrons. The 8 spots are all full. It's stable. You could also think of it as being divine. They are content and complete as they are. They don't want or need. They have everything they need to persist. Stability. Divinity. Now, think of each noble gas as you go down the periodic table, you go down the column. Each noble gas could signify a religion, for instance. Now, on the opposite side of the periodic table, you have the more reactive elements, right? And organic chemistry, we say that each element is trying to fill their octet. Each element is trying to find peace. Each element is trying to attain divinity that the noble gases exhibit. Now, this is the left side, this is the right side. Noble gases, highly reactive elements. The elements over here, think of them as being these are the charged elements. Think things that carry a positive charge, for instance, like sodium, magnesium, or calcium. They're much more reactive the further they are away from divinity. Now, it's tied to emotions. Think emotional stability. At the opposite end of the spectrum, you have emotional instability. Where there's emotional instability, you have a high reactivity. So, same concept, idea, a few different ways of thinking about the exact same things. I like finding meaning. This is what I like to do. This is how I try to retain information. I attach meaning to everything around me, right? So, back to the periodic table. This is the noble gases, the highly reactive elements. Think of it as unhappy. They are much more in need of being completed the further they are away from divinity. I'll make another connection, or try to. Think of the noble gases as being people that are comfortable being alone, people that are comfortable being single, right? They feel like they have everything they need. They don't need other people. They're content. They're in their careers. They have their familiar unit. Whatever the case may be, they're stable. But on the other end of the spectrum, you have the more highly reactive elements that need to be completed. They are so far away from having peace or being content with who they are. They have this strong desire, this need to be completed. And they'll do everything they can to chase the feeling that the noble gases persist in, always. So these people might be more inclined to try to find a relationship, try to form another bond with someone else who more times than none is just as emotionally reactive as they are. Meaning. You can attach whatever meaning you want to the simplest of things. And you can find profound insight if you choose to. So yeah. So it's divinity, the divine within, right? There's noble gases, calm, stability. It's high reactivity, discontent. There's another component I want to throw in here. Oxygen-free radicals. Now, if this is discontentment on the periodic table, the elements over here, and this is stability and calm and peace. Oxygen-free radicals seek to destroy. By their nature, they will attack your DNA and unravel your DNA. Highly reactive, highly destructive. There may be people in your life right now who behave as if they are oxygen-free radicals. They seek to destroy, and they will, unless you do the things within yourself that you need to in order to prevent your unraveling, your undoing. They're very dangerous. Well, luckily, we have a mechanism within our bodies called antioxidants. So instead of the oxygen-free radicals attacking and unraveling your DNA, they latch on to the antioxidants. It's your defense mechanism. We should all have a defense mechanism, right? There is one more point I want to make. I want to bring in a little microbiology. I want to talk about pathogens. Pathogens are, you can think of pathogens as bacteria that do harm to a host, to us, to your body. They'll cause damage in some form or fashion. And then you have opportunistic pathogens, right? They'll lay dormant. They won't cause any damage. Your body won't recognize them as being foreign or damaging. Oh, this is fine. They're not doing anything until you become immunocompromised in some way. Immunocompromised is when your body's immune system, your body's defense mechanisms break down. It could be because of that time of the month, if you're a female. It could be because of stress. When you're stressed, or it's that time of the month, or like finals week, for instance, you're more likely to get sick. Those once dormant pathogens become opportunistic. They're waiting for a moment to attack. They wait for you to become weakened before they will attack you. Now, there are people in this world who behave as if they are opportunistic pathogens. They'll seem safe friendly, they'll smile, they'll be charming, you'll like them. What they're really doing is waiting for a moment for you to be in a weakened state before they attack. Opportunistic pathogens, waiting for the opportunity to do damage. Now, what are the ways that emotionally we become emotionally immunocompromised? Well, traumatic experiences. They can expose us, weaken us, if we haven't overcome. Those opportunistic pathogens, they're looking for the emotionally immunocompromised people, waiting for the opportunity of exposure to attack. It's kind of scary. Another way we can become physically immunocompromised, not in the sense of your immune system, but prone to attack. For women, alcohol consumption. So you go out to a bar or a club, you're having fun, you're drinking, and you're drinking. It gets to a point where you become drunk. It's natural. But you also become compromised. And there are opportunistic pathogens who present themselves as friendly, charming, and nice men who are waiting on opportunity to take advantage of your exposed state due to the effects of alcohol. Everything I've talked about there's meaning to be extrapolated from a lot of what I've said. But that's only if we start thinking dope, not dumb.